Next, I'm excited to welcome Ian Lasic-Ellis, who is also a prior Stanford gymnast, multiple-time NCAA All-American and national team member. He's going to start us off with our questions. I'm also going to welcome all the speakers to come up and have a seat at the chairs here. And I'm also going to use this as a moment as Ian is talking, please start thinking of your questions. We're excited to hear from you, the audience, and get some really good discussion going here. So Ian, to start us off, please come on up.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you all for your talks. It's really fascinating work, and I think you're really going to give future athletes actionable insights to help prevent these injuries. My background is in gymnastics, where I trained for about 18 years and was a gymnast here on the Stanford team. And throughout my collegiate career, I had 2 ACL tears. I had my first tear at the end of my sophomore season on my right knee. And then about 11 months later, I had a second tear on my right knee, warming up for competition, at Stanford Burnham Pavilion. That being said, I'm very invested in the technology being developed to prevent these injuries for future athletes. And I think one of the really interesting challenges with the ACL injury is that it's a very common injury amongst a wide variety of sports, and these different sports require different demands of the athletes. And so like adjusting for prevention and rehabbing for all these different type of demands is really difficult. And from personal experience, that was one of the more challenging parts of my rehab, where you have to build up and prepare yourself for the specific tasks of gymnastics. And it's very hard to simulate landing 15 feet from the air from a high bar dismount. And Greg, I was wanted to ask the first question to you with your brain augmented neuromuscular training. Do you see these protocols being generally applicable, or do you see that the brain demands and the sports demands, it varies from sport to sport, like a landing mechanics for gymnastics versus a cutting movement in soccer? And do you see that the protocols can generally apply, or does it need to be specifically tailored for the athlete and for the specific demands that they face?
Well, that's a great question. First of all, we don't even consider gymnastics to be on the realm of all of our sports of injuries, because the injury rate for ACLs is just up there. So it's a high risk pattern. And I think in answer to your question, there's specific principles we can do that close the window for their bad mechanics. So we can build the best athlete that has these safe mechanics that are general across the board. These are risk factors. However, we also have to have training principles that apply and transfer to the actual sport that we're looking at. So there's not going to be one size fit all, and there's also different risk factors for different sports, different genders. So we have to consider that. But we can take the basic principles of the mechanism, we can improve that. And the big thing, the kind of the neurocognitive, the kind of those aspects of it, that crosses the board. If we can make you more neural efficient, you're not using your sensory motor parts of your brain to kind of sense and feel it. You're more automatic for the motor component, and that sets you up for the other demands. And then both in perturbations in soccer of the player, but also in gymnastics, the demands of trying to find yourself in space as you're trying to land. So I think we don't have a one size fit all, and I don't think we'll ever, but I do think that there's some general principles that would cross over all athletes.
Yeah, Greg, I'd love to see your virtual reality next iteration instead of the square. You need the gymnast landing from the high bar.
Exactly.
And then we're working on so many levels. I got a whole bunch of questions, but is there anyone from the audience that wants to come up to the mic and ask a question? Not yet? Okay, I'll give you a little, oh, Scott's coming. Okay, you can go first.
So I have a question for Alex. Ski bindings have DIN settings. If they're too tight, you blow out your knee. If they're too loose, they come off when you don't need them. Cleats don't have that. If they're too tight, you're going to blow out your knee, too aggressive, and if they're too loose, you're going to slip. Is there thought in the shoe industry about how, based on your weight, height, shoe size, how aggressive you're going to be, how you do a setting for a cleat? Not that any cleat would have to be adjustable, but it's like, here's the cleat for you, given your desires and injury risk.
Yes, I like this question very much. So there isn't, and if you consider, for example, the studs on a female cleat that's a female size, the length of those studs are the same whether it's a size 6 or a size 10, but they're also the same as if it's a men's cleat. So they're not scaled in any sense. And I think that would be one step in the right direction.
I mean, that's ridiculous, actually. I have to say, why would they be the same? If your mass is lower, the stud should be shorter.
Yeah.
I mean, cut me a break.
You're thinking about the right thing. Yep.
Okay, sorry.
And what about my biases? What about the pediatric athlete or the adolescent athlete? What about that isn't quite as mature in their movement pattern or as technically skilled? Should we also be, just like ski bindings, we'll have more technical skiers higher on their DIN. Do we need to do the same for, how do pediatric soccer cleats currently manage this?
Yeah, so if you look at youth soccer cleats, there's a little bit of a range. Sometimes we will see smaller studs that are almost made of a different material. They're more of a rubberized material and less tech, according to these sporting good companies, goes into them for sure. But ultimately, at the end of the day, all athletes, youth athletes, professional athletes, want to pick what looks cool. So if they can fit in a regular cleat, they're going to reach for that.
All right, we'll take our next question from the audience.
Hi, thank you for these great presentations. I'm John Klein. I'm a division chief for adolescent medicine and pediatrics here at Stanford and new to the farm for my second year now. But my question follows on that, on the question of pediatric care, and especially because we know that so many more high school athletes and younger kids are likely to get injured because they're trying to perform like elite athletes and they're still learning. And so how do we translate some of the discoveries into policy and practice that can help us with the younger population so that we prevent them having that sort of chronic setup for injury? And then a second and completely tangential question is, how do we apply some of this to performance elite, whether it's music or dance or other things that are also using the same kind of forces and the same kind of drive for elite performance?
Do we take it? Do you want to go?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think for one of the things that we're really excited about with tools like OpenCap that allow us to take these measurements in more realistic environments, we can kind of actually get the spectrum of performance from elite athletes to individuals who are, or athletes who are just starting out in their club teams, their local teams, and doing movement for fun. And so we can really take that elite performance and learn what are those resilient patterns. But from the younger side, we can kind of think about actually understanding how does growth spurts, how does that affect how people are changing? How does puberty affect how people are moving? And how does that influence their risk for injury? So I think what we're hopeful for is with these tools, we can start to get more data and apply some of these techniques to understand the biomechanics in those settings.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And how quickly you guys can capture data. That'll allow just so much more information to figure out how these movement patterns change as adolescents mature. I think it's a really good question.
I think the only thing I would add to that is, again, the youth athletes, they are wanting to play at the elite level. We need to prepare them at the same level so they don't do the preparatory conditioning. As we talked about, we heard earlier, they're not getting the opportunities to train and properly prepare. So that's a unique opportunity. The other unique opportunity is to create tools that are more scalable and usable and have a greater uptake. So virtual reality, AR, kids, we can now do implicit. We used to say we can't train a kid unless they can take direction and apply it. Well, now we can gamify it and correct them and manipulate their performance and their adaptation in a way where they don't even know why they're adapting. So that's the opportunity for the youth athlete, I think, that we can capitalize on.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Hi, thanks. This is a great panel. I really love the variety of presentations you put in here. I'm Lori Plautz-Snyder from the School of Kinesiology at University of Michigan. My question is for Alex. It's great to see you here. In terms of professional or really elite players, what do you think is the role of custom orthotics to control how the foot interacts with the shoe? And have you done any work in that area or thought about it?
Yeah.
Which I bet you have.
Yeah, I actually haven't. So let's see. We have never worked with orthotics and how they can change knee mechanics in cleats, but I know there is a little bit of a movement in that area, whether it's for a corrective effect or even a performance effect. I've seen recently add this carbon fiber insole to your cleat to make it more like a super shoe or something like that. So I can't speak too much on a research level because we haven't looked into that, but potentially interesting.
Do you think it could help prevent injuries, or
I guess I don't have
is it a long shot?
Yeah, I don't have any reason to say yes at this moment, but I don't know. Yeah.
So there's a little bit of evidence that if you have a pronated foot or athletes that walk in pronation, they tend to initiate a knee abduction load more rapidly at foot strikes. So I think it's something to consider what you're talking about.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Iris. I'm a medical student here interested in orthopedics. Thanks so much for this wonderful panel. So as someone who's torn both my ACLs, first left side, then right side 5 years later, I'm wondering, especially for Dr. Myer, in terms of the neuromuscular considerations, has there been any work on after like tearing one ACL, like the if there's any apprehension, does that affect your probability to tear the other ACL? Because intuitively, I think that might be, reasonable. Or like if you've had any other joint, injuries.
Well, you're 100% on the hitting the nail on the head, and some of the hottest research in the secondary ACL field is kind of the psychometrics and the psychobiology of return to sport. So there is a significant effect of having a prior injury and fear of return to sport. What's interesting is we just did a meta-analysis on it, and we found that those psychometrics don't do much on predicting if you're going to return to sport early on. But when they get later into the closer to the time of return to sport, they do matter a lot. And so, whereas earlier measures in the biomechanics tend to help predict if you're going to return to sport. So, what you're talking about, you're 100% on it. It's a hot area, and it's also a nice area that we can start to implement into the neurocognitive, neuropsych training for the future and training with the brain.
Okay, cool. So there's like some work thinking, in terms of like the neuromuscular, brain apprehension that you might have psychological.
Yeah. Just from a simplistic standpoint, what happens with athletes as they torn their ACL, and what I showed you is all primary. We've done also some of the brain work in secondary ACL. So once they've torn their ACL, the person becomes heavily visually reliant. So they're trying to visualize. And often we say whenever there's an ACL injury, there's a mismatch between the perception of when they think their foot's hitting to actually when it did hit, and that perception. So when that athlete becomes overly reliant on vision, and if you train them, if you're in the rehabs, they start looking at their feet more. You'll see those athletes that have had an ACL injury, they look at their feet more, trying to set that up as they train. So we do training that is focused on called strobe training or synaptic, where we take away their vision, and then we can also in virtual reality starve them of some of the vision that they want when they perform, and that's how we're training for it.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Emily.
Hi, fantastic talks. All right, we're at the Female Athlete Research Meeting. We can't not talk about hormones and the menstrual cycle, hormonal contraception. There's a lot of buzz around different phases of the menstrual cycle potentially increasing or decreasing risk of ACL injuries. Can you speak on the science and where it is and maybe where it isn't?
Can we take it?
Yeah, take that.
So we've looked at that both on there's two things you can look at: the menstrual cycle, and then during ovulation, the laxity. That's we found a little bit of a relationship near ovulation, not strong. And then we also done some work where what phase is it? That pre-ovulation phase is higher ACL injury risk. But that's the kind I was showing. It's not strong evidence. It's all across the board. If I showed you, it's not a point. It's half of the cycle. So it doesn't give us a lot to deal with. I think there's a lot of buzz out here now about training during the menstrual cycle, which kind of gives me pause because we play throughout the menstrual cycle. And so we do know that taking an oral contraceptive, certain oral contraceptives can stabilize the biomechanics, but it doesn't, we haven't seen an effect on reducing ACL injury. So our thoughts, we have to train and develop neuromuscular control throughout all phases and manage that within. And again, there's effects of the menstrual cycle that we have to consider, but we're not finding it as a huge driver.
Awesome. Thank you.
I love the lineup at the microphone. Sign of an enthusiastic setting. That's good. Okay.
That was very much my question as well. But I guess off the back of that, can female athletes train in certain ways to prevent? So you've just mentioned that there's not much science to back up the different phases because, again, it's not at a particular point. It's kind of across half the phase that there might be some differences there. Can athletes prepare certain trainings for each separate phase, or again, is it more of a redundant concept?
Do you want to take? Go for it. Well, again, I think that there's some consideration during the luteal phase, whether they don't feel well or that is something that they would want to alter potentially their training. I don't follow that philosophy. I think we need to train and train throughout the menstrual cycle. It's the same and then target. If there was a disruption in neuromuscular control that we can measure, then I would say that might be a specific target. It's just like fatigue as well. You have to consider it and adapt to it, but I don't think that it's something that we train through, and I don't have any evidence to support that.
So you wouldn't alter an athlete's training schedule or type specific to when progesterone levels are at their peak, changing that elasticity?
Not right now, not that I have the evidence to do it. And I think from a practicality standpoint, I train a team too, so that the team has a training. So having a personalized approach that would take them out of it, and then managing all of their menstrual cycles, my game schedules and things, it could get complicated. Now, I'm not saying that there's not a possibility here. I just don't know that we have the evidence just to say this should be a target that we would modify our training right now.
Thank you.
Maybe just that much more important to have that neuromuscular feedback and practice during these different phases if there is going to be different feedback from the body. Kevin.
Great. Wow. Great morning discussion. Thank you all. And I'll just, whoever wants to handle this, but I suspect Greg will have some comments. Great to see you again, Greg. A couple things. One, can we identify people that even if we think we might be able to train them a little bit and make them somewhat better, but is it possible to start identifying people at certain ages and maybe even advise them or their parents for the young athletes that your daughter or your son might think about running cross country or doing swim team or doing something just based on various different factors? Because I do think that injury prevention is something, it's a difficult conversation I have to have with people. They're high risk. They want to go back to soccer. They're a 16-year-old female athlete. They're on their first ACL. They come back with their second ACL. This is not an unusual scenario in my experience, unfortunately. But are there attempts to talk about, sort of pre-training about, hey, we need to train you to do a different sport mentally and physically just to avoid that injury risk? And then the other question maybe is quite different, but I just came from a presentation about arnold-claudical ligament injuries in youth, collegiate, and professional baseball players. And there's lots of data on training volume, intensity, and volume. Are we missing an opportunity to understand the cycles of training and fatigue that develop at certain stages of the season in which we may need to alter the training or alter the intensity of training to give them more recovery time? Because do we know if there's a connection between overtraining and fatigue, perhaps, that occurs during natural cycles of any sport that might contribute to increases in ACL tear?
Krithika, do you want to speak to I think you are well suited to answer that first question and then.
Sure, yeah. So thinking about, I guess if you're considering, I guess maybe if you could rephrase the first question, actually, that'd be helpful.
Should we be trying to counsel families and maybe patients about maybe there's some sports your daughter or your son might be better doing because there's certain things that predict their risk of an ACL tear in the next 3 years? Playing high school basketball is 43% as opposed to 8%.
Right. So one of the things that I didn't talk about with the score that we're developing is thinking about kind of providing more sub-scores to understand which parts of the lower limb chain is someone actually stronger in versus more injury prone. And so what we're hoping with this is that we can provide a little bit more targeted feedback to say, okay, this individual might have a knee performance that's a little bit more injury prone, but perhaps their ankle is stronger, or their hips are stronger, their trunk is stronger. And so I think we are hopeful that we could start to provide that kind of insight that, okay, maybe this individual has biomechanics that are better suited for a different sport. The other thing that I will mention, though, is that we don't have, we're really focusing on trainable biomechanical factors with this type of assessment. And for someone who might have higher laxity or some of these non-modifiable factors that predispose them for a higher risk of injury, perhaps that's not something that we're going to be able to get from this type of assessment, but rather would require more like imaging or other types of data. So I think that line between what is trainable and what is not trainable is still sort of requires additional research.
I think that, so you want help on having the, hey, your kid's a motor moron conversation? Is that what you're, but I guess it's your philosophy too, and I think you see the bad end of it. You have the parents coming into your clinic, and you're dealing with their pain. What on the flip side, we're not seeing all the benefits of sports and the team sports, and we get from that. So I think I have a different philosophy. I think we can train a lot of these kids to be safer in sports, even with the results of injury risk. We know that's out there. Not everybody's going to be perfect for it, but I think that deterring them from some sports after 1 or 2 ACLs, then I think that it's an easier conversation, but not prospectively.
Maybe we give them shorter cleats once they've torn their ACL.
Alex will fix it.
Thank you.
So super intriguing panel. I'm Ephraim from Simon Fraser in Vancouver, Canada, and our lab is partnered with Heddas, which is like a female-specific shoe company. So I'm more familiar with running shoes and running biomechanics rather than soccer. But they like design or they change different aspects of the shoe, like the plate or the toe box or the heel. My question for Alex is, did you consider or do you think that changing different aspects of the cleat rather than the stud length or like the shape could change the biomechanics or affect performance in female athletes for soccer?
Yeah, I think it can absolutely affect performance. So with Puma, it's interesting in that the last or the upper is made from female data. So it was already at a really great starting point. That's quite unusual in the footwear world. And we're not making any modifications to that, but in the qualitative feedback, we are asking athletes about overall comfort. And when it comes to comfort, I think athletes perform the best when they are comfortable. So making those adjustments, like maybe a wider forefoot, but a narrow heel, are super important for female footwear.
Yeah, cool.
So what kind of things did the females say they really loved? Like what were the features other than comfort that seems like you haven't?
We asked about comfort, stability. Would you play game in these cleats? Would you buy these cleats? And it was very interesting to see that overall the participants that we were working with preferred the prototypes of compared to the control, which the uppers were the same. The only thing that was different was the traction on the bottom.
Excellent.
Thank you for a really interesting and thought-provoking panel. I'm Leslie Subak. I'm the chair of obstetrics and gynecology, so my life involves hormones, the pelvic floor, perimenopause, and menopause, so my brain is going crazy listening to you. But something I'm thinking about, it's physiologically adaptive that women during pregnancy have high estrogen. We need it so that our pelvis can expand and deliver these large babies. But if we can control that with continuous birth control pills, we don't have to have a menstrual cycle. In fact, data suggests that it's better to be on continuous pills without having a cycle than to actually be on 3 weeks of an active pill and 1 week of nothing. So if we took girls from a young age and allowed them to be on continuous birth control pills to control their cycle, could that make a difference if we have years of having a lower progestin environment?
So you're asking me my opinion, and you're the expert.
But I don't know the data. I can't wait till this afternoon to look more.
I'm 100% agreeing with you. That's what I think we should do. And again, I think it's a controversial because having the conversation with parents about putting their daughter on birth control at these early ages is the thing that I stay out of. That's not my wheelhouse, but I'm 100% in agreement. And some athletes are already doing that naturally. They found the way, but more of the elite athletes are doing it.
Okay. Then your whole team is on the same lack of cycle. And it's great for ovarian cancer prophylaxis as just something to add in Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ava. I'm an undergraduate student here studying human biology. And Alex, I have a question for you. So I know that there's been a lot of discussion regarding turf versus natural grass, just in regards of like injuries. And so I was just kind of curious if you think that the cleats are going to have the same effect on both playing surfaces, or maybe the mild type might be more suited for one versus the other.
Yeah, I really like this question too. So it's tricky, right? Because there's so many different surfaces out there, and turf can vary from field to field too. And the literature is kind of split on whether injuries are most likely to occur on turf or natural grass. There's also some interesting developments in new methods of artificial turf, for example, rather than that rubber infill, cork infill is one option, but there are some challenges to that. All to say is that, so turf shoes do exist. No one likes to play in them, especially when the field is, let's say, wet, or who knows. But I think at the end of the day, we have to provide athletes with one cleat that can work for really any surface. For whatever reason, if you think about, so runners might have different shoes for a tempo workout or an easy run, but soccer athletes just have the one. So I feel like focusing in on that is where kind of the footwear industry really needs to go.
Okay, thank you so much.
So we have time for one more question. These have all been excellent.
Don't give us a zinger, Cindy.
Hi, my name is Cindy Chang. I'm a family medicine, sports medicine physician, and I'm the CMO for the National Women's Soccer League. So thank you all for your presentations. So many things to think about and talk about, and realize that it's been 35, ever since I started in sports medicine, 35 years we've been talking about ACL tears in women. So I have lots of comments, but the one thing I want to get grassroots, one comment is changing from one pitch to another. So grass to artificial, hybrid, that changes movement patterns. So if you've got a team that's practicing on an artificial turf field and they're going to play on a grass field, they need time to get used to those perturbations and the differences. So that's something that's being researched right now across the pond. But the point is, grassroots-wise, when we talk about neuromuscular fatigue, when we talk about fatigue in general, a small survey that was recently done showed that over 3/4 of women have symptoms of bloating, breast tenderness, fatigue, poor sleep during their menses. So we have to get down to the grassroots education. And those women who had gotten formal education about the menstrual cycle compared to those who didn't, same lack of knowledge about the menstrual cycle and the effect on performance, injury risk, et cetera. So we have to continue to educate our girls and women about menses and what we can do to try to decrease their symptoms and improve performance and decrease injury risk. That's all.
Thank you, Cindy. I don't think there's a specific question in there, but I think that was an ideal way to close the session. But I'd like to thank all the speakers for a wonderful session, obviously bringing up lots of great things to talk about and increasing awareness around female athletes and their performance. So this closes the session. I encourage everyone to get a movement break. Come back at 11 for another exciting session, and I'll see you then.